Hey there, this is Perch. There's a point in comics where the creator or the individuals behind the comics start to get to be bigger than the comics. And what I mean by that is, in an organic, good way, you have, say, Chris Claremont, whose name became associated with the X-Men, and his name sold books. You knew that actually, if you were doing an event and there was a crossover and the crossover issue was written by Chris Claremont, you knew I better pick this up because this is part of his bigger story, and it matters. The flip side of that coin is that when Chris Claremont wasn't writing an X-Men book, those writers had to try almost a little bit harder to get noticed and get make sure their books were received well, because Claremont, just the message went out that if Claremont was on the book, this was a book that was worth paying attention to, and if Claremont wasn't on the book, then 50-50 chance it's going to go nowhere. It's not tied into main continuity. It will be erased at some point anyway, and so that becomes kind of a double-edged sword, that you can get a lot of benefit from a creator's name, but if the creator gets bigger than the characters, then that causes other issues you have to worry about. Those are nice problems to have. If you have a creator name that's so strong that fans will come and pick it up no matter what, and then you have to worry about the comics that aren't written by that creator. Again, this is a good problem to have. In the grand scheme of things, this is a good problem to have. Same thing was kind of true of John Byrne and Fantastic Four. Byrne's run on that title is pretty epic, pretty legendary. A lot of people have really fond memories of it, and Byrne did a lot with the comic. That was kind of the glory days of Fantastic Four. The closest it's ever come, and still didn't hit the same notes, was Hickman when he was on Fantastic Four, and you got to a feeling like this creator was really going to do something major with these characters. Even Mark Miller and Brian Hitch, who was supposed to be kind of a year epic run on Fantastic Four. It was fine. Some interesting stories came out, mix, some good, some bad, but nothing that surpassed what Byrne did or what Hickman did. Now, the other side of a creator getting kind of too big for the title, or where the creator starts to eclipse the title, is situations where the character's public life or online life or whatever it happens to be gets so noisy, so big, that you can't help but read that writer in the comic. And a good example, I think, of that from history would be, Peter David, when he was doing his run on the Hulk. There was it's always something notable when you're in the shop and somebody comes in and they want to talk not about the comic the creator did, or not something that the creator did on the comic, but they want to talk about something going on in the creator's personal life, or it's like Orson Scott Card, and he had his controversy, kind of some anti-gay statements, and you have a bunch of people coming in really liking his books and liking his novels, and then when they start coming in and wanting to talk about his social positions, that's always a really good sign that whether you're for his social position or against his social position, things are screwed. Like, in the sense that it's always bad for sales long term. It may, if the right circumstances exist, it may have a minor sales bump in people kind of coming in to see what this controversy is about. But in the end, whether it's in a month or whether it's in a year, the controversy always goes in the other direction, and the sales slump. You can't have the controversy get bigger than the work. But Peter David, who was and is, certainly not at his run when he was doing Hulk and X Factor, he got into a number of feuds with other creators, and was writing an article at the time, and he did some kind of well-published stunts at some of the cons where he would have debates with it was supposed to be Todd McFarlane, but Eric Larson, and just various things. And it got to be where the hijinks of Peter David started to kind of almost, you felt like you were feeling them in the comic. The Incredible Hulk had some sales suffer during that period, because it felt like the creator was coming out too much. And to some extent, that's true with the Image comics as well. And it wasn't, the lateness was the big killer for the early, for the 90s image stuff. But some of kind of this, I've got our fists up, we're breaking the rules kind of behavior from image. It was attractive at first. It brought some readers in, absolutely, at the beginning. But over time, it started to wear as you started to feel like, well, you put this way, people would come in and say, I like Mark Silvestri. I like Jim Lee. I like Jim Valentino. They're the nice ones. And you're like, well, what do you mean nice ones? I mean, they're all making comics. What does them being nice or not nice fit into things? But Todd McFarlane got kind of a rep for being a jerk. So did Eric Larson, Rob Liefeld as well. They got the attitude became larger than the comics. And again, you can cultivate a attitude of kind of edginess and that kind of stuff, and it's fine. That can help sell books. But if you're not careful, that attitude will tip things over. And it brings us to today. So right now, people online, people who are quote unquote Comicsgate, or some of these people who are criticizing some of the comics or frustrated by the comics. There's a barrier between people who are irritated by comic creators who are making political statements on Twitter, or who have said some outrageous things or what have you. Most of that stuff goes nowhere, meaning it doesn't go beyond Twitter. None of it makes it into the shop. You don't hear about these things going into the shop. Good example might be, I think, Max Bemis, who did Moon Knight. He was very kind of outspoken in online about his political views and kind of some of the fans that he was irritated by, and so on. And that it got all the outrage on social media. People got mad and got mad, but the controversy around who Max Bemis was and what he was saying never made it into the comic shop. He wrote a Moon Knight title that was, I think, it suffered from being, in the eyes of. I remember one fan came in and looked at it and said, "I like Moon Knight, but this is not Warren Ellis." And I think, well, no, it's completely different than Warren Ellis, absolutely. And it's like, pass. And so the title didn't do well. And so there, some people came in like, wow, there's some new stuff going on here with Moon Knight, cool. Moon Knight as a character, it's one that nobody seems to really get right. There's an interesting part to him, but it feels like creators come in and they take kind of a half-hearted swing at Moon Knight, and then they all right. Then they just I'm going to write another 6 issues or 12 issues, and I'll be canceled soon. And that's just kind of how it goes. And but the title didn't do well because it wasn't a great title. It didn't capture people's attention. Was it the artist, the writer? Who knows? But it wasn't their personal comments or personal life that was doing it. Another good example might be Chelsea Kane, who did Mockingbird and is doing Maneaters now. That's a funny one because if I feel like Kane really wants that online persona to be, the most dangerous woman in comics, and really wants to live on that kind of hype outrage machine, and has said so in interviews like, I leaked this, or I went ahead and said this, and I knew Marvel might come and sue me, but screw it, I can't be contained. I mean, she's made comments that kind of infer that she really wants to stir up the controversy. The problem is that most fans didn't take to the controversy. It didn't resonate with them. So people coming in buying Mockingbird. I remember that first issue of Mockingbird came out, and people were like, "Hey, this is pretty weird, pretty unique." There was some. I remember there was some optimism with this book, and I remember reading it thinking, "This is an odd take, a little bit different, kind of, had a kind of a different feel to it." And it then issue 2 came out, and it was like, nope. And then it kind of sputtered on, and by the time the comic came out with the famous "Ask Me About My Feminist Agenda," that a lot of people, both pro and con, have really wanted to talk about a lot, nobody cared. Yeah, in the store, nobody cared. I remember people going up and seeing it on the shelf and going, I mean, all right, she's got a T-shirt. I remember one person coming in going, "Mockingbird's a feminist?" And I'm like, I read all the issues, and I'm like, well, yeah. I mean, that's kind of been in the story. And the guy's like, "Oh, I never noticed." Like, okay. you're reading the comic, right? I mean, all right. But it just, there's a meh kind of reaction to it. And same thing with Man Eaters. It's that comic really wants to be edgy. And the only thing edgy about it is that there's been two issues now published, which are kind of like companion issues, which aren't really comic. And I mean, I don't know how many I think we're like three, maybe four actual comic issues have come out. And then there's been two like companion kind of journal issues come out. And I always think like, what comic, what does she want to do here? I don't know what kind of comic she's wanting to write. I can't get a sense of it anymore. But anyway, that's an example of creators who online we think, oh, they've got a big controversy brewing. They've got a lot of stuff going on. But at the end of the day, no, not really. Most people just don't. It doesn't. It doesn't resonate. People are easy to tune it out, and that's kind of what we see. Um, on the other hand, like Mark Wade is you're hearing more and more about Mark Wade that you didn't used to. And the interesting part about Mark Wade is you're not really hearing about the lawsuit with the Diversity of Comics guy. You're hearing it in the this guy seems like a jerk, or people like to come in and they like to tell stories. So sometimes this stuff is kind of low burn, and then people come in and go, I hear this guy's a nutcase. I hear he goes and throws tantrums and like throws comics around and is mad. Like you're starting to get those stories out. And those are, it's always interesting when you get to that point because once you start to get the reputation for, this guy may be crazy, it very quickly hurts. Like I said at the beginning, there are some people who will buy into controversy because they're kind of wanting to see if maybe this writer is going to blow up, and I don't know what they expect. That the person's going to go on some kind of rage in the comic. I don't know, but um, but very quickly that turns to apathy. It never sustains into to anything, and that's kind of what you see happening right now with a lot of the comics. Anyway, um, so where's all this going? It's that creators have to be careful, whether they're artists, writers, whoever it might be. If they let their kind of outside personal persona eclipse the character they're writing, then there's a just a really high possible potential for that to go wrong, just completely and utterly wrong, very very quickly. And that's what you see in a lot of books, and that's what tanks people who really kind of dive headfirst into, not outrage, but wanting to build this super edgy persona. I'll say outside of comics, I think Ryan Johnson, who did the Star Wars stuff, there was so much kind of outrage about Last Jedi, and people are angry about him, and then he turned very salty on Twitter and kind of went after a lot of his critics. And at first, I think that worked for him. I think that it was good for his brand. It was good for him as an individual. He was fighting back. He did get kind of his reputation of a director who was willing to stand by what he did, which I think was quite positive for him. But he's done it. He's gone to the well too much. It's kind of like when if like 100 people say something, go to defend yourself on social media, then I think that can be seen as heroic. But when like two people say something and then you jump in with both fists and start retweeting and kind of immediately go to the shotgun, I think that's where it turns on you, because what was being seen as a kind of a valiant, this person's standing up for their opinion, soon becomes this, people start looking at as this rich, privileged creator who's, being given free reign to do whatever they want, is now just picking on any fan. And so it's very easy for that controversy to turn around. And I think that happens a lot, particularly when you just got to know when to come in and take your spots and respond to the criticism and be gracious when people want out of it. I think that's the other thing that always gets people, and it flips the comic or the novel or the movie or whatever it is from being kind of about the comic to about the creator, is when a fan comes in and says, I hate this, you're awful. And the creator's like, well, you're awful. And then the fan comes back and goes, you know what, I was having a bad day. Sorry, I don't know what I'm talking about. Or kind of backs away. And then the creator just keeps hammering. It's like, no, you don't get to back away. Screw you. I hate you. That's the kind of stuff where it's like, oh, you're not the victim anymore. Suddenly you're the perpetrator. And once you have that vibe, I think it's destructive for work. It always is. What do you think? A lot of people have a lot of comments and thoughts about this. It's a topic on social media literally every single day about the line between, the creators treat fans like jerks, but the fans go after the creators, so the creators should be able to defend themselves. There's this interesting kind of balance between the two. And what do you think? What's your opinion of all that? Would love to know your thoughts. Hey, like, comment, subscribe, tell a friend, click the bell for notification, and thanks for listening.